a decent number of turnout. So let's get started. So my name is Sujeev Srivastava. I'm the CEO of Carnegie Mellon Tech and Entrepreneurship Middle East. I'm Dubai based. For those of you who don't know, CMU Tech and Entrepreneurship is a CMU volunteer-run alumni organization. It's global. It's designed to build trust capital amongst us alumni so we can help each other get jobs, form companies, or simply, like today, learn from each other. This is our 6th event. It's in the Zoom webinar format. So you'll be able to see the panelists. You will not be able to see other attendees. Post this, there will be a networking session in the regular Zoom format where we'll all be able to see each other. Today, it's a very exciting event. It's about blockchain. We have CMU alumnus Mohammed Madfu, who's the featured speaker, and it's moderated by Vinit, who graduated from the Silicon Valley campus, and Yanna, who are going to introduce themselves, a bit in a little bit. So now I think over to you, Vinit.
Let me just unmute myself. Thank you, Sajeev, and a very warm welcome to all of you guys out there. My name is Vinit. Just to start with a quick introduction, my name is Vinit, and I specialize in digital transformation. I work in the intersection of business and technology, playing program as well as product management roles. I graduated from CMU in the year 2011, and since then I've been working for companies like Emirates, NetApp, Accenture, and Oracle. I've got overall over 15 years of industry experience. I'm a geek at heart, and I sometimes wonder what's better than getting paid for working in emerging technologies. But it's been a good ride. And in 2018, my team's innovation efforts were appreciated by Dubai Quality Group when we were awarded UAE Innovation Award. I got into blockchain via experiments at Emirates in domains like loyalty, logistics, as well as marketplace. And I was really amazed by the technology. And I started doing some side projects as well, like building mining rigs on the side, playing with trading bots, and so on. That's a bit of a rant about me. More importantly, we have with us today Mohammed Mahfood, Managing Partner of Decaford Blockchain Advisory. Mohammed is a veteran at entrepreneurship as well as a blockchain specialist. Mohammed, first of all, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thanks a lot for finding the time. Do you want to start with a quick introduction about yourself, Mohammed?
Oops, sorry, it was on mute. Okay, thank you. Thank Vinit and thanks Sajeev for the introduction. It's a real pleasure and thanks for having me here today. So yeah, I don't know what to say. I worked for a long time in startups, in entrepreneurial domain, either as setting up a company myself or acting as mentor and angel investor for a very extended period of time, covering different areas. I come from a technology background, and however, of course, having the technology background allows you to work in multiple industries. So, I jumped into so many different areas. I work in many different countries, but the main focus is startups. I work a lot with early stage startups, helping them, get the initial seed funding growing, and usually we exit before Series A or at Series A. So that's really the area where I work with, and we personally and the team I work with, we like to work with science-based, deep technology type of startups across the globe. And I'm blessed that I have worked in multiple continents: Europe, Latin America, Australia, Middle East. So get an exposure on all of that.
Thank you, Mohammed, for that introduction. I also have with me Yanna. Yanna needs no introduction after the very successful webinar she moderated last month. But Yanna, just for the new joiners, would you give a quick introduction?
Thank you, Vinit. Hi, everyone. My name's Yanna. I'm a CMU alum from CIT, class of 2013. I have been working in the startup industry for a while. I was a startup founder myself, for anyone who is a newcomer and wasn't there in the last session. I currently work at one of the largest IT providers in the aviation industry, SITA, and I manage their innovation and transformation for Middle East, Africa, and the Indian subcontinent. We do have a blockchain alliance ourselves that we're working on from CETA, which I am trying to learn more about. So I am not that well versed in blockchain, but I'm super excited for today's session. I will be moderating the question answer part. So if you guys actually like throughout the session, if you want to take some time, write down your questions in the chat option. And once Vinit and Mohammed are done with their discussion, we'll be going through all of your audience questions as well as the questions that you have put down when you put it when you filled out the form. So again, at any point, if there are any questions that anyone has, please type them out and I'll be making sure that we go through them all. So thank you so much. And Vinit, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Amna. Thank you, Amna, for the introduction. So we'll just get going with our topic. The topic for today is blockchain and tokenization. Now, when I went through the registration information, I think all of you guys are well versed with blockchain. So blockchain as a technology doesn't need an introduction. And tokens play an important part in the blockchain network in terms of enabling the security as well as enabling the growth of the network. Now, tokens also are tradable and hold a speculative value. And that speculative value is something that has been gaining a lot of attention all this while. But then there are also other serious applications of blockchain and tokens. And that's what we're going to cover today in our topic, tokenization of assets. So, Mohammed, before we delve into the topic, can you tell us a bit about how you got into the space and what's the story behind your startup Decafor?
All right. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, I work with startups for a long time. And around 2016, 2017, I had a portfolio of companies where I own a small equity as either a seed investor or as an advisor. And as you know, the private companies, the equity is illiquid. So whenever you need to cash out or exit, it's quite a challenge. And of course, that's a process we were working on, but it's not easy to exit these private companies, especially at the early stage. I came across the blockchain being in Dubai. Dubai was a hub for something called initial coin offering, ICOs in 2017. There were lots of events and seminars about blockchain. So I attended few, and I found it quite interesting, especially the initial part of tokenization, the ICOs, and how people were just raising money like crazy. And we participated in few of them, to be honest. I mean, coming from management consultancy, investment area, we work with certain projects, but then it realized that it doesn't make sense in certain cases. It does, in some occasion, make sense. In many of the examples that were in the market, it didn't. And at the early stage, and honestly, being in Dubai, it's also a very good hub. One of the a founder of one of the major securitization or tokenization platform, Securitized, was in Dubai, Carlos Domingo, and we've had the opportunity to discuss what is going to happen. And all of us agree that the token concept is interesting, but it has to represent something, either a real utility for an ICO or some real asset. And that's where, the market industry looked into the security token concept and using the token to represent an asset. We realized early on that this is going to be a complex subject for many. And we said, okay, it's a good opportunity to set up a consultancy and help whoever wants to navigate this domain and grow with the industry. And here we are, and this is really happening. So that's the reason. And the other reason is, of course, being an investor in startups. The token gave a promise of liquidity, which is very interesting for me personally. When I need to exit, for example, if I have it in the form of a token, at least theoretically, and we'll discuss, the industry is yet to develop fully, but that promise of liquidity is really attractive for me and for the people who are looking to this.
Sure, sure. That's very interesting. Now, Mohammed, when we hear use the word token, we hear a lot of different kinds of token. You know, people use the word utility token. Our topic for today is security token. Then we have the digital currencies, also called the stable coins. So, can you tell us a little bit about what are tokens exactly, and what are these types of token, and what is the meaning of tokenization? The word tokenization.
All right. Can I share my
Sure, sure. You can share your
presentation?
screen.
So I can use
Yes.
it, you know, just to. All right. So can you see it?
Yes, I can
Okay.
see.
So the different type of tokens. Okay, I'll just touch on it quickly, but that's really a subject that needs to be discussed separately because my focus will be in the security token or digital assets. Now, some people say they are different. Some people say the same. Again, it's not an important distinction right now. The different type of tokens, you know, coming from the technology, the blockchain, and the idea behind the blockchain, creating an incentive mechanism in a form of a token, and then associating a smart contract to a token, so you could program, you know, that token, and it created a revolution in the ICOs and the STOs in the last couple of months. If people are involved in the DeFi industry, and we're gonna see a lot of things coming up. So the definition as per regulators, for example, they distinguish between a currency like Bitcoin, which is, let's say, more or less like a dollar. So it doesn't have anything but use as a currency or a store of value. And we're not going to get into the debate of, you know, whether it's a true money definition or not. And then regulators distinguish between a concept of utility token. For a simplification, utility token to me is a voucher, is an upfront sale of a service. So whether, like, and a good example is Emirates Skywards. Emirates Skywards, for example, is a utility token. If they created it on the blockchain, once you have it, you can get a discount, you can get to access certain services. It does not give you any right on the company, on Emirates Airlines. It doesn't give you voting, revenue share, or anything in the company. Now, the security token, and that's where lots of, you know, challenges on that, is anything that represent an asset, such a, you know, property, maybe a painting, an art, for example, or even football players or artists, music, or you know, an equity or a financial component of a company like a revenue share, or you know, any form of a cash flow. So any asset that can be represented by a token, it's a security token on the broader definition.
Sure, sure. That's a good point. And you talking about Skywards is sort of close to my heart because I was with Emirates for a few years. And definitely, I think one of the things on their roadmap as well was to be the second currency after dirhams, right? And they were looking at blockchain to achieve that. And that's at some phase of development right now. Hopefully, there'll be more action there. Now, Mohammed, when we talk about security token and tokenizations, you know, tell us a little bit about the market opportunity and which are the industries that you see getting disrupted by this phenomenon.
Okay, so let me jump to, okay. So to this slide. Now, the concept of tokenization, just to you know, jump on that, is, you know, creating a token, and a token for our discussion is a piece of code on a blockchain technology. And there are so many blockchain protocols, as I'm sure everybody is aware of already. And that token is a representation of an asset. And the asset could be, by the way, an asset on the blockchain, such as a Bitcoin. Bitcoin is an asset that can be tokenized. So a token can represent a Bitcoin, and that's, you have certain technologies available to give the Bitcoin in the Ethereum protocol, for example. Or it can represent an asset outside the blockchain, like a piece of land, painting, or an equity in a company. So what is the size of the market? What can be tokenized? Everything around you. So here is an example of certain industries, you know, derivatives, for example, global debts, and these numbers are in the trillion US dollars. We focus a lot on the real estate because, I mean, real estate and equity of companies, at least in my personal view, are the best industries to be tokenized. So real estate is already a huge market, 200 trillion. Not all of it is tokenized. Not all of it is, a prime real estate. So I think the commercial real estate is around 30 or 40 trillion dollars. So that's still, a big industry. So you look at the potential to tokenize any and all of these things, whether all of it or part of it. So that's so derivatives, debt, real estate, money, stock markets, commodities, and so many other things.
Sure, sure. So basically today, a commercial property is sort of within the reach of high net worth individuals, but, common people with low savings don't have access to it. But what you're saying is that if with tokenization of these high ticket items or high ticket assets, this sort of gets more liquidity in the market, and even a common investor can also pump money into a commercial property and get benefits from that. Basically, that's sort of the possibility that this security tokenization is opening up, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Let me see. So yeah, here's, for example, now I'm focusing on real estate for various reasons. One of the reasons is real estate indeed is already, as we speak right now, is one of the leading industries in the tokenization. So things are happening, and projects are actually tokenizing the ownership or tokenizing, the cash flow. So there are so many different things to look into it. Benefits for the tokenization. One concept, what you're describing, is called fractionalization. So you take a piece of land or property and you allow multiple owners to own it. So each one can own one square foot, for example, or a piece of it, whether directly, by the fractionalization, or indirectly by creating an SPV, and the SPV gets then tokenized. So there are different ways. And this is very similar to the REIT. And I'm sure many of you are already aware of the Real Estate Investment Trust, where that REIT owns multiple properties, and the investors can take a piece of the REIT and then indirectly have access to an underlying asset. The difference is now with the tokenization is it gives more access to a global audience. Again, lots of complexity, we can talk about it. It's because of the blockchain technology, the settlement is immediate or near real time, removing intermediaries, and all of these benefits that are there. So for example, you have fractionalization. It gives you a better liquidity. REIT, for example, REIT, any property under REIT gets a premium between, if I'm not mistaken, 12 to 20% premium because of the potential liquidity that the REIT provides. So the tokenization of real estate assets, we believe it will also increase the value of the underlying asset, and then it will provide access to a global group of investors. Cost efficiency because of the underlying technology, the blockchain, and we could talk why the blockchain, intermediaries are not there, so settlement is very fast. And transparency because of the nature of the blockchain, immutability, transparency, traceability, all of these factors.
Yes, so you brought a good point. Basically, tokenization has been there for a while now, but with blockchain, what are the possibilities, or why blockchain is a good technology for tokenization? And the answer you give us is that there are better operational efficiencies with blockchain, for example, faster settlements and so on. And it is much easier to manage the process of tokenization using the technology blockchain rather than building centralized systems that sort of take a lot of effort to build, maintain, and grow. So that sort of brings greater transparency and decentralization to the whole industry, isn't it?
Yes, and again, let me, okay, here is, and my personal views. Again, this webinar here, I mean, I don't want anyone to take it as my, it's an education on blockchain, and there are lots of materials about it. But why the blockchain matter to the security token, and how will it transform the digital assets and the, representation of assets? Number one is the, ability to program the token. A token is a smart contract, and a smart contract is a piece of code. And whether in whatever language now, in Ethereum is in a Solidity, but other blockchain allow you to use Python or any programming language. Today there are restrictions in what you can code in this, but eventually it will evolve. So the ability to code. So I have a token that represents, let's say, an equity in a company, and I can add to that token, which is a code, certain restrictions. For example, I could say this token cannot be transferred to non-X citizen, or it cannot be given to a certain location, or whatever it is, or it is 1 year locked up, so it cannot be transferred. So that can be coded. So I can put my company regulation, my jurisdiction regulation in a code. Now, not all of it, again, for the sake of time, we're just running through it. Another key element with the blockchain is the tradability and transferability. Now I have a token. As you said, you could write a piece of software on a centralized and you create tokens. At the end of the day, as we say, everything is digital already. But the blockchain gives me that platform that I can create a token and it gets transferred. So the fundamental operation is there, and I can move it from my wallet to somebody else. Again, with the programming on the token, I can put restrictions so it doesn't flow, because when I transfer ownership, there are certain requirements I have to check. Auditability is very important because each transaction, each smart contract, each token, there is a log. You could look at the transaction, you could trace it, you could audit it, with keeping the privacy, of course, is not. And the uniqueness and immutability. Immutability is, of course, as everybody knows, the blockchain, anything in the public blockchain like Ethereum is there. Now that creates an issue with certain privacy laws, like in the EU, for example, the right to be forgotten law. How does it work with the immutability? But these are certain things that the regulators have to look into, and the evolution of the blockchain technology as well.
Sure. Thanks, Mohammed. So let's talk about Dubai. So Dubai government has made huge commitments, public commitments in terms of blockchain adoption. Yeah, they say that they want to get more than 50% of their transactions on blockchain by 2021. Now, talking about our country, what are the things that that governments are doing in terms of regulation here? Can you give us an update on that?
Okay, now blockchain is something, so that's a technology, and the government is pushing toward the usage of the blockchain, and there are lots of use cases between like settlements and traceability, documents, so on and so forth. We're looking at tokenization, which is one use case of the blockchain, and especially security tokens, which are representation of assets. Now, there is a heavy regulatory element around this, because now I have a piece of technology, a software that represents a real asset. So the governments are worried, how do I make this technology actually work? How does this token really represent, let's say, a piece of land or a part of a land or an equity? So there are regulations coming around the world. And UAE, the good thing is UAE is really in a very advanced stage. And very soon you will hear an announcement that a tokenization law from the Emirates Security and Commodity Authority, and they will define the different type of tokens, the usage, whether utility, security, and all of that. So what we are seeing in UAE, if I'm not gonna like the blockchain, yes, there is a push for it. I'm like pushing, talking about the tokenization. So the UAE is pushing into that area. Different jurisdiction, Abu Dhabi Global Market, ADGM, already has a security token law for the last 2 years, and hopefully soon there will be a company issuing the first security token offering in ADGM. So regulations are coming in place, and there is an interest from the different areas in UAE and globally. Like if you look into Europe, Germany, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg are already. Monaco announced that they're going to create, they want to be a hub for tokenization, and the governments are regulating that. So there is that movement is happening right now.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a lot of action happening in this space. I read some regulations coming from Germany on this. I heard Singapore is doing some. There are some startups out there who want to tokenize certain commercial buildings, wherein they want to get more people to invest in it and sort of bring greater liquidity. So it's definitely an interesting space, and hopefully there's more action happening here. Now, talking a little bit into the ecosystem for tokenization. So I understand, there are multiple players who are in the ecosystem to make this end-to-end process work. Definitely there is a technology platform provider. who's going to help with the tokenization. There are regulators who have a role to play. Who are the other players in the ecosystem for tokenization, and what kind of role do you see them playing?
All right. So here in this slide, it can be simple and it can be complex. Now, the whole idea of tokenization is to remove lots of the intermediaries that are existing today in the financial market. And by the way, when we compare tokens, it's basically, it will disrupt the public equity market. However, at this stage, and I believe the audience here come from technology, understand the concept of disruption, it's far away. I mean, the public equity market the public market is very liquid. STO is still not there yet, but it's developing. Actually, in the last 3 months, we have seen a major growth in the security token market size, and things are moving there. The main things, if I look here, we have a technology stack. So you have something called a token issuing platform. Now, you could, blockchain is an open source. Let's say I'm talking about public permissionless blockchain. So we don't talk about private permission blockchain. So anybody can go to the Ethereum, pay a little bit of money, create tokens, and code whatever they want. It's too risky because it creates liabilities and so on and so forth, especially for a security token. So what happened? There are players in the market. They came up, said, you know what, there's an opportunity, and they created technology platform that allow you to create a security token. You define the parameters, and you have the token created with the smart contract, and which is audited and properly done. There is one major thing with the security token compared to the utility token. Utility token, if I have in my wallet whatever utility tokens, including Bitcoins, currencies, and so on and so forth, I can transfer it to somebody else without verifying the recipient. We're talking about security token, like ownership in a company, it has to be recognized and defined. So there is a process of KYC, AML. Sometimes if you're talking with the financial, counterterrorism financing regulations. And what happened, we see that players coming in the market with technology and services. And that's also a market that's going to grow, the identity management, the KYC, AML, know your client, anti-money laundering processes for any investors joining, whitelisting the investors. You have a concept of custodian, whether when you receive the money and token for an investment, or when you issue the security token. Like what we see in the market, many of the investors who will invest in security token are traditional investors. They're not comfortable yet with holding a token in their wallet. So they keep it with the custodian, with a regulated company that is protecting that. And then, of course, the exchanges. The ecosystem cover many areas. I'm not going to cover all of that, but that's the key area. Where we come in, we said, okay, we can cover the consultancy, look into the implication of taxes, valuation, because the token gives you a potential of liquidity. So it will improve the WACC or the DCF valuation, for example. There are lots of things to look into. The ecosystem is being built. There are broker dealers coming to the market who have a license for digital security. By the way, there is one in ADJM, one in the IFC already with a license to do digital security distribution. Custodians are coming, escrow services, of course, lawyers, and Dubai has lots of these players in the ecosystem. So technology, you have the professional, lawyers, accountants, consultants in the market, and of course the investors and the liquidity providers.
Sure. Thanks, Mohammed, for that overview. Now, being an emerging area, it is evident that a lot of infrastructure is being built up. Foundational infrastructure is being built up in this place. You talked about KYC, AML providers. You talked about exchange. You talked about custodians, because it's not as easy to maintain a cryptocurrency. We've got private keys, public keys. People, if they make mistakes here, they have a risk of losing the assets altogether. So it's not as easy as a bank account yet. So those infrastructures are coming in, wherein a common man can get into it. What are the other roadblocks that you see in getting this technology to the mainstream? We talk about custodians, we talk about regulations, we talked about building up the baseline infrastructure, but what are the other things that you can think of that sort of stop us from getting mainstream?
Well, okay, there are lots of things. So I'll try to be very brief on number one, regulation. Regulation, now, you don't need to regulate everything. So you could create today a token that represents an equity in a private company, and it's still okay. The issue is that when there is a dispute and people want to use the token as the reference, so that's a big problem. And the issue with the regulators, like trying to identify how a token will become a legal tender. It will become a legally binding element. The idea of using the blockchain is not to create a redundancy. Today there is a redundancy. We call it a two-tier approach. So I create an SPV, a company, issue the shares in a normal way, and then I create a token to represent it. But that's redundant. If you look at the regulation in Germany, they talk about something called the register. So you don't need to have the paperwork, and the blockchain register is sufficient. And if there is a dispute, you can go to the government and look at the blockchain and the token, and they said, yes, that's a legal tender. Now, the issue here, blockchain technology is highly fragmented, lots of technologies, lots of products. So you're looking at an industry at the beginning. So till things settle down, there are changes, definition of security, definition of utility. It's still not clear. So that is one. The other main obstacle that we see is liquidity. I keep saying promise of liquidity, and when we talk to the people in the market, say you have to be careful. Token is not going to generate money for you. I mean, 2017 was a crazy period. People raised billions out of thin air. That's not realistic. It's not going to happen again. So when you want to raise money, it's business as usual. Your underlying business has to make sense. Your real estate property has to make sense. And then it's a hard work. So, and then once the token is listed in an exchange like T0, if you guys want to look into it, there's still not that much liquidity. But if I compare it to the private market, when my liquidity, if I invest in a small company, I have to wait 7 to 10 years to liquidate. And in the security token, within 1 year, I have a potential of liquidity. So there is an improvement. It's better than the private sector. It's not compared to the public. So liquidity is still an issue. And the third one is the investors, the lack of confusion, or, is this secured? Is it safe? Is it a scam? What regulations do I use to protect me? And so these are the hurdles that we see in the market. But as we move on, we see better technology coming, different blockchains. Actually, we're seeing right now blockchains that are being created specifically for security tokens. So the legal contract gets embedded in the technology. We have seen an example of a company put the article of association on the blockchain, get approval from a certain canton in Switzerland, put certain conditions for property trading, for example, in the blockchain, and get it approved by the regulator. So we're seeing that. And hopefully within another 1 or 2 years, you see the technology maturing, regulation getting clear, protection, and then exchanges that create liquidity. And that will create the market.
Sure. That's a great point, Mohammed. I think we have just enough time for one more question. And my final question would be, with all this action happening in Dubai and worldwide in terms of regulation, the baseline infrastructure coming up, where do you see us heading in the next 4 to 5 years? And what is your take on, what are the things that you can see tokenized the first? And what is it that, people out here in this webinar as entrepreneurs, what should they be really looking out for? What kind of opportunities should they search for and, try to build something on their own? What would be your advice on that?
Okay, that's a tough one. So the industry is at the beginning, and you have to see 10 years ahead. So if you see it today, you're not going to jump into it because, as I said, liquidity is not there. Technology is highly fragmented. So you have lots of opportunities. Now, building blockchain protocols is quite complex, so maybe you can skip that. There are opportunities in creating, identity management services, KYC, for example, and it's a critical component for the security token. Without it, you cannot move on. There are lots of things around payment. We haven't spoken about. One of the promises of security token is, for example, creating an automatic payment of dividend. So that's easier said than done. That's by itself a huge opportunity for people to look into how is that going to be done. Of course, you could use stable coins or different type of blockchain type of token or an external things. And there is, as of today, although we talk blockchain is decentralized, I mean, most of the things are not fully decentralized. There is a mix of decentralization and centralization. So mixing between the blockchain or on-chain, as we call it, to off-chain accounting system, certain services will be there. Technology and like custodian, they are needed, exchanges specifically for the security token, the ecosystem around it, the KYC, token issuing platform, maybe specializing in certain areas. I believe real estate is one of the easy industries, and it's happening, by the way. There are projects in the market that raise money, especially in Europe. Germany is really advanced in that area. In US, couple of projects. So that is already happening. So real estate, number one. Number two, I think personally, or at least we're focusing in the startups. If the startups have a tokenized equity, it will encourage the angel investors to jump in, because there is, again, we have to be careful. There is a potential of liquidity that will be increasing in the next 1 or 2 years. So we see that is coming. If I just quickly, like UAE, for example, introduce the UAE Pass, which you can download it in your mobile. So I think in a year or two, everybody in UAE, as an example, will have their digital identity in their mobile, which is your KYC component is taken care of. Governments are talking about creating a cryptocurrency central bank currency, the new dirham, which is using the blockchain technology or a DLT technology. That will allow people to transact and buy security token faster. So these things, I think in the next 3 to 4 or 5 years, we'll see much more acceptance, much more tradability. Again, security token, something we haven't spoken about, is giving more investors the chance to participate.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mohammed, for that. And I was just looking at a title deed paper, and I was surprised at a small note at the bottom of it that says that the digital asset is stored on blockchain. So the world is moving much faster than many of us think. So I think there is great opportunities here, and I encourage all of you to look into this technology. Now that sort of brings us to the end of the panel discussion. I want to give it up to Yamna. Yamna, please take over from here, and we are happy to answer the questions that audience has for Mohammed.
Yes, thank you so much. Such an enriching talk, everyone, guys. Like, honestly, I think I learned quite a bit. We've had quite a few questions come in. So just going back to Mohammed, what you spoke about in terms of the fact that different countries are thinking of tokenization and stuff. One of the questions that we got was, what is the risk you see in some countries adopting it and some countries that aren't, especially in terms of international trade and everything?
Yeah, that's one of the key problems that regulators are worried about. Not only the adoption of regulation, is the differences in the regulations, because definition of stable coin is different from place to place, or what is a security token, digital asset. So that is one of the issues that I think over a period of time will come. The technology itself, you have multiple blockchain protocols, you have multiple security token standards, how the smart contract is written and what standards. So these things, as an early industry, it will happen. Now, I think now what we are seeing, that governments around the world are racing to adopt the technology because they want to create, a haven, they want to become a hub to attract companies, because they realize, whether it's because of COVID or whatever it is, that things are moving digital, including money, including investment. And that's one thing that is very critical. That is something that is very complex. So that's part of what consultants like us look into when we do a company. So the issuing location, jurisdiction where you do the issuing, has to have a very clear regulation. And then if you want to attract investors from different regions, how the approvals and the all of that is working. The issue will also come in the exchanges, because exchanges will have a broader audience from different countries, so they have to embed the regulation for each country. There is no simple solution for it, unfortunately, but more and more countries are adopting it. It's
And
happening. So it's there.
okay. And what about in terms of not just companies, but not just governments, but more of, so you did mention that you are working with private companies as well in terms of where they can get located. Could you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So for example, if somebody wants to create a token, we have a process. Look at let's say if it is a startup in the whatever it's software, blockchain or non-blockchain or anything like that, they need to raise money. So we study what they're doing and what is the best location. For example, if you do in Germany, you could get a quick approval. And by the way, the regulation differs if you're going to raise money from private investors or public investors, accredited or non-accredited. So for accredited and private is very quick. It's very easy, relatively speaking, because all I need to do is comply with the regulation of that country. So I create a company, the article and memorandum of association, shareholder agreement is already defined. And I may or may not need an approval from a government. Usually I need an exemption saying, they look at it, said, fine, you can go ahead and issue a token to represent an equity. And then I can raise money from private and accredited investors, which is non-inclusive. The idea is to go to a broader investor base. So if I want to raise from small investors like 50 euros ticket or $10 tickets, whatever it is, I need to go to a public investor base, like I'm doing an IPO, but for a small company. And that needs an approval from a jurisdiction. So Germany will give a quick accelerated approval if I'm raising up to 2 million euro. So if I have a startup in Dubai, want to raise around 2 million euro, it might be a good idea to have the SPV for the token for the fundraising in Germany. And then that allow me to raise money only from EU residents. So then how do I raise it from outside? You look into all these kind of regulations and what is needed and what type of technology and so many elements that needs to be looked into, but it is happening and it's doable.
Just from your experience, how accessible do you think it is for startups? Obviously, it's a lot of hurdles, like you mentioned, obviously companies and governments are focusing in it, but there seems to be a lot of capital investment. There seems to be a lot of time that goes into it. So how accessible do you think it is for startups specifically?
What do you mean accessible to tokenize, to raise money or what?
Yeah, to raise money.
Well, raising money, I think the same problems are there, like, traditional fundraising. So right now it's much more difficult, of course, because of the current global situation. But if the investors understand that if I invest in a small company as a seed investor or like an early stage investor, my investment is locked in easily 5 to 7 years, and it might go up to 10 years. And that's one of the issues in the Middle East, for example. Seed investors do not like to participate because their money get locked in for a very long time. Now, if they have a feeling that this token will be listed, and I saw a question about the liquidity, the token, because of the technology, I can list it in certain exchanges. These exchanges are regulated. And that allows the possibility of tradability. So maybe somebody will buy the token from me. Usually they get listed within 1 year. So if I invest today, depending on jurisdiction, let's say all countries require a 1-year lockup before I trade it. So it can behave like a publicly listed company, but again, it's not publicly listed company, small public offering. The token can be traded, not to everybody in the world, but to a bigger group of investors. So that once the investors realize that, they become more interested. That at the same, number one, security token, they get the equity. So it's like a normal investment. And then they get the bonus of the token that it can be traded, which gives them a better exit. But again, it will take time. As of now, tokenization does not guarantee fundraising. So let's be clear about that.
Fair enough. Now, going back to what you had mentioned earlier, which was about the tokenization law that's coming from the UAE, I imagine since you have some inside knowledge, one of the questions that was asked was, what are the most important lessons learned from the recent laws that are coming out, from your experience so far? So do you have any personal stories to share there?
From the laws are not there yet for UAE, for example. So for us, we work on places where either they have the law or they have the exemption.
Okay.
So you can work in the US, for example. You don't need to get it under, approved, but you get it under an exempted regulation like Reg S or, variations of that. So that's the concept. UK also, can look into the structuring, the offering, and you tell them I'm doing a token. Their worry is, are you avoiding taxes? So if everything is okay, then they can say, go ahead. That thing is, they don't give you a letter saying you are registered or you're regulated. Now, if you need to raise from public, usually you need to be regulated. And as of now, UAE has only an ADGM. We didn't have any experience ourselves, but of course the market that we work with, and it's still difficult because it takes a bit of time. The whole thing is new. Regulators, go through this at the beginning, so it takes a little bit of time. To get an approval, on average, it takes about 9 months in different jurisdictions. So that's a very long. We take the approach of private investors and exempt it. So that takes within 1 to 3 months. If that answers.
Yeah. And we have one last question, which is actually not on it's not on tokenization. It's about blockchain. And the question is, because you've had so much experience, obviously, again, in blockchain, what do you think why do you think blockchain, right? What is the hype around blockchain over other things that might be more secure, more robust? Why do you think that is being so hyped up or being picked up so quickly as well? Just, what is your opinion on that one?
My personal opinion, number one, blockchain is just one type of the DLT technology. And there are different flavors coming into the market, like, graphs and, different things. So blockchain itself, I mean, one of the key things that really I find it amazing is the open source concept, where most of the blockchain protocols are open source. What does it do? It accelerates the innovation. So you have lots of people around the world, they can see the Bitcoin, the Ethereum, and even many things. So the innovation becomes faster. And we have seen in the last 3 months, if anybody is following in the decentralized finance and the crazy things that were happening, and people are experimenting. And that speed of that technology, something more secured, I don't know. I think blockchain is really robust and secure. It's not like Bitcoin and Ethereum are not fast, but they're not made. They were not created as a mean of payment, for example. So now there are different blockchains that are very fast. So number one, open source, peer-to-peer, the ability to communicate directly. The creation of the token was a very interesting concept, which was created to create an incentive for the people to use or to become nodes or add services to the blockchain. And that is creating an industry. So now, as they say, the blockchain is the internet of value. The internet is the internet of information. Now we have a new concept. So the token, whether it is real money or an asset, it is starting to create, a hype in the financial sector. So immutability, for example, the fact that once it is there, it is secured. Traceability is very, I'm talking again, public, permissionless blockchains. So the private ones have a different behavior. So these are very secure, and there are lots of technologies coming to the market that people should look into it, like Fusion, Cosmos, Polkadot, for example, where they're creating interoperable technology. They embed the certain behavior in the blockchain, and things are just getting much more exciting every day.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's a new emerging technology, but one that's definitely growing at a pretty great speed. So yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Mohammed. I'm just going to pass it on to Sajeev now. Sajeev, if you want to take everyone through what we're going to be doing after this session, because we'll be having a little bit of networking.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. It was an amazing session. I learned a lot. Thank you, Yamna and Vinit, for making it so interactive. The next part of it is where we will actually get to know each other, in the regular Zoom format. I have shared, you should have all received an email with that Zoom link. So I'll just broadcast the Zoom link on the chat now to everybody, to those that didn't get it, and see you